out to you. Well, thank you, Billie, after the webinar, along with a copy of the slides. So during the presentation, we're going to be dropping different links from the slides into the Zoom chat, so you can click on them as we go, but they're also going to be available in the slides afterwards. We do ask today that you utilize the Q&A feature in Zoom to interact and drop in your questions, and I think you can even upvote questions. So go ahead and utilize that. And we're also going to have time for an open discussion between everyone on the call towards the end of the webinar. So this webinar is presented to you by the Renewables Acquisition Team here at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. You're going to be able to hear from all of us today, starting off with me. My name is Fatima Abdul-Khabir. I'm a research associate here at the lab, been here for just a little under 2 years now. It's also my pleasure to introduce Gerald Robinson. He's the program manager and project lead, as well as our resident solar O&M expert. Gerald has supported federal agencies over the last decade with the procurement and management of on-site solar PV systems and is an advocate for best practices with solar PV O&M to ensure quality, safety, and performance of these systems. And last but not least, Billie Holecek is also on the call. She's my fellow research associate who has been working with the Renewables Acquisition Team for the past year and has been a part of research around common solar PV O&M practices. So those are our email addresses under our names. We're going to have this slide up again towards the end of the webinar. So go ahead and feel free to reach out and ask any questions at the end of the webinar if you need to. So this is today's agenda. I'm going to start off talking briefly about the types of programs that are sponsoring this work. Then Gerald is going to take it away to go over what the current market looks like with solar PV O&M and what the need is for solar O&M, both in the federal sector, in California, the state of California, and even in specific sectors in California. He's then going to continue on to discuss what a lot of you solar O&M providers might find interesting, which is how institutions are requesting services and what sort of requirements they have with contracting these services at both the state and the federal level. Billie is then going to take us into the buyers portion of this webinar, which includes discussing, why O&M services are important for your PV system, talking about some advice that we've heard from solar providers, and providing you all with resources on O&M and how to find solar providers and how to connect with solar providers. So we're going to then wrap up our presentation portion and go into a discussion session where we hope to hear a lot from both sides and from everyone on the call about just some common challenges and opportunities with solar PV O&M. I'll just note again that throughout this presentation, feel free to put your questions in the Q&A session in our section in the Zoom, and we'll either try to answer them as we go along in the presentation or wait until the discussion session to address them. Okay, so this research effort is funded in part by the Empower Procurement program. Empower Procurement is a procurement assistance program funded by the California Energy Commission. Our primary mission is to increase the adoption of clean energy and energy efficient technologies in the state of California. Our team at Berkeley Lab, so that includes the 3 of us on the call, as well as 2 others, we lead the contracting and consulting initiative out of this program, meaning we work with a lot of large institutions and organizations across the state to discuss some of the challenges they're having with sustainable purchasing. We help them develop a sustainable purchasing policy language and other contracting language, and we even help them develop the tools that they use to procure, so like e-procurement systems, to make sustainable purchasing easier for these institutions. So that was a little 2 cents into the program. Feel free to visit our website here at the bottom if you want to learn more about our program offerings. So this research is also funded by the Department of Energy's Federal Energy Management Program, or FEMP. FEMP is a broad program that is aimed at helping federal agencies meet their energy and sustainability goals. And we do this through various efforts like on-site distributed energy implementation, performance contracting, fleet electrification, and other resilience initiatives. So our renewables acquisition team at the lab, we specifically work to support FEMP by providing technical assistance and procurement expertise to federal agencies. So again, you can visit the website below to check out some of the resources that we've developed for renewables acquisition. Oops. Sorry, skipping ahead. All right, so as promised, I said I would go over some of the content briefly from webinar 1 that Billie and a former team member, Kevin Watson, did back in September. This webinar was predominantly for solar O&M buyers, and we really dive deep into some of the common challenges with solar PV O&M and the importance of O&M for your solar systems. So Billie is going to be covering a little bit of that information today, but if you did want some more in-depth background on this topic, you want to go ahead and check out webinar number 1. So the link is in the slides, and we did just drop it in the chat right now. So go ahead and check it out. Moving on now, I'm going to hand it over to Gerald to start off and tell us a little bit more about what the existing marketplace looks like for solar PV O&M. Gerald, I'll let you take it away.
Great, thank you, Fatima. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I see from our poll results, we have 7 service providers, which is good. That's what we were hoping to get a pretty good showing. These would be service providers probably from California. So in bringing service providers and buyers together on this webinar, one of the things that we wanted to do and start out with is show the size of the institutional marketplace, which we think is substantial. So we're going to go over a few examples here. So the federal sector in California, we know that as of 2020, there is over 500 federal sites. And you can tell if you sort of do a system average divided into the 250 megawatt hours, there are pretty decent sized systems spread around the state. There's obviously probably a few additional ones since 2 years have passed. But that's just for one part of the institutional sector, that's a pretty good number. So next slide, please. So here's some data that came from the Energy Commission, which was collected from the net metering applications through the 3 investor-owned utilities. And it shows obvious, you know, on the bar chart to the left, you know, the tremendous growth rate, which is no secret to anyone on this call. But also shows on the right, which we thought was interesting and worthy of showing you, is the distribution of the solar systems around the state. You can see the darker colors have a more higher density of systems. Next slide. So one of the things that we also thought was really interesting that we wanted to share with you is that, you know, there's an assumption that in the institutional sector, most of the systems are probably power purchase agreements, you know, because they are in the institutional marketplace, is nonprofit, you can't take the tax credits. We discovered that is not the case. There is a tremendous number of customer or institutionally owned systems in the state across all sectors. So that means there's a great need for O&M services. So everyone has built a lot, and there's sort of now at this point in time, it's like, no, we need to maintain these systems. So on the right is a breakdown. It's a little bit, we're a little bit unsure of some of the breakdowns. We didn't get a good definition from the data set, but you can see, you know, commercial, educational, other government, industrial, nonprofit, military. We think hiding in there in the commercial bar is probably some other government, like state or federal or something. So there's a little bit of the size of the institutional marketplace kind of obscured there, but worth seeing. So next slide, please. Here's another example that we think is pretty impressive. This is data taken from Proposition 39, which was a program administered through the Energy Commission that provided direct funding for energy conservation and on-site renewables to K-12 schools around the state. Just one program, just one pathway in which K-12 has obtained solar. You can see that the green bar represents the K through 12 owned or school district owned systems, and then the blue bar or the blue section represents power purchase agreements. Nearly 500 systems, most of them, again, institutionally owned. So another big chunk. It's worthy pointing out here that there's other ways in which this sector has obtained on-site generation. This is just one. But you add up the numbers, it's pretty impressive. So next slide, please. So another thing that we wanted to do is give the service community some insights about institutional, working with institutions. So it's obviously a unique community of procurement rules. Next slide, please. Countervailing sort of the stereotype that, oh my God, institutions are very bureaucratic and oh my God, I can't manage, to possibly contract with these people. There's too many requirements. And one of the things that I think is really worth keeping in mind is that there are unique benefits to becoming a service provider to the institutional marketplace. One is institutions are stable and long-term customers. They're not subject to mergers, bankruptcies, acquisitions or moves or whatever. So those things in the commercial world can cause contracts to come and go. You're not going to find that in the institutional world. They're very stable. The other thing that's very unique to institutional procurements is that most every sector, so federal, state, and local, have objectives to obtain services from small businesses. So one example is the federal government actually has a requirement with a certified small business to pay in 15 days. That's phenomenal. So, having been in the private sector myself, I know that cash flow is an issue, and that is one of the requirements that's directly meant to help small businesses. So there's many other programs, depending upon whether it's state or federal or local, that gives preferential treatment to small businesses. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we've observed in putting this material together and talking with various institutions is that there's kind of a few ways in which people are buying O&M services. So the first one is sort of your reactionary O&M method. An inverter goes down or some other sort of problem or fault is noted, and you're going to get a phone call, right? And that agency or institution is using what we call discretionary funds. So, they'll dispatch you out to fix the inverter and they'll pay you out of discretionary funds. Those discretionary funds are out of a general O&M budget for the entire facility. They're limited and it's one-off. Then you'll find that institutions will, just issue small, simple contracts as long as they're below a threshold. So for example, in the case of federal agencies, we know in speaking with one contract officer that, they have a $2,500 limit below which the agency can issue a simple commercial contract for services. But, that's again, very limited. Number three, which is what we're promoting, is that, folks go into more formal multi-year contracts for stability. And that's where these sort of institutional requirements will come in that, are considered, somewhat bureaucratic to manage. But we feel like number three is really a preferred method for a number of reasons. Obviously, operating and maintaining a piece of machinery takes stability. And so that's what we're promoting. Another way that federal, state, and local may procure services is through a master contract, or we call it also multiple award contracts. There's the U.S. General Service Administration has a version of that, and then the state of California through the Department of General Services has a master contract program too, and we can talk more about that if you're interested later. Another area that I think is interesting is what we call ESCO, that's energy service companies in a subcontracting mode, and I think the next slide goes into detail. Yeah, so this is in the world of institutions, in energy projects, there's a community of companies. They're called energy service companies. They largely serve federal, municipal, university, school, hospital. We kind of call it the mush market. And they provide all sorts of manner of energy services to these institutions. And by and large, they subcontract most of the services that they need to fulfill a contract. So it's an excellent, I think, untapped source of business for the service community. They also, like in the case of federal contracts, they have requirements that they have to have small businesses behind them. So that's a good source of potential business. The Department of Energy Federal Energy Management Program maintains a list of pre-qualified ESCOs, and we provided a link here to that. Those are often the same companies you'll see also providing services in the federal, local, municipal, university environment. So this could be a useful list. Next slide. Another thing that we did is we wanted to tell you what we're finding in terms of solicitations that are being released. So we went ahead and did a little bit of research and found some solicitations, and we pulled out the kinds of things that institutions are looking for. I don't think there's any surprises here. Obviously, cleaning and electrical maintenance, vegetation management, but it's worth pointing out that monitoring data management is a pretty big one. Seeing that across the board, but this is at least another aspect is, I think, is the assessment reports is a big one that you'll find in the institutional marketplace. They really need to know what the state of affairs is with an array. So anyways, next slide. We'll give you some examples of some federal contracting requirements. These are just a few examples. So we have a McNamara-O'Hara Service Contract Act that dictates how agencies interact with service providers. Endangered Species Acts, which other than the soap you might use to clean modules with, I don't think is very applicable here, but also probably of biggest interest is the small business requirements that federal agencies are beholden to. Next slide. So one message that we'd like to give is that for those of you considering working in the institutional marketplace is that you're not alone. There's a recognition that it is unique to the business community, and there is a lot of resources out there to help you, free resources, to help you bridge that gap and get started. So in California, we have these procurement technical assistance centers. They're called PTACs, and there's 8. And they have trainings and they have counselors. They'll help you with all sorts of things, finding customers, responding to bids, becoming qualified as a small business. They're all there, eager to help. This covers federal and state, so it combines everything into one office. Next slide. So, obviously the Small Business Administration is there to help you. Their services also can be obtained through the PTAC centers, but they also have separate things, also free. And, they have all kinds of one-on-one assistance with, procuring, responding to solicitations, So they have one-on-one services. They also have all kinds of training, webinars, lots of things to help you ease your engagement with the institutional marketplace. Next slide, please. So here's an example of California Department of General Services. This is a snapshot of their calendar. They offer some trainings, and they have kind of just informational webinars. So, you know, like on March 10th, contracting with California state government, right? So it's a 3-part webinar series on how to do business with state government. So there's awesome support and information everywhere. What we do recommend, though, is that you start with the PTAC centers, because they can feed you in any direction, any resource. And from there, it's a one-stop. It's meant to be a one-stop resource for you, so you don't have to go to multiple places. Next slide, please. So the next thing that we wanted to do is get a little feedback from you, the service providers. And so we have another poll that we'd like to put up. So essentially, you know, what information about institutional contracting would be helpful to you? And so we've given you some pre-baked choices. So we'll take a few minutes, respond to the poll, and then we'll just sort of look to see. Great. This is very helpful. Okay. So 2 things jump out right away, you know, where to find opportunities when they're posted, which is something that we can absolutely address. And then support to the ESCO community. Yeah, some orientation to the ESCO community. Okay, yeah. Another one, preparing for bids. And then how to become a recognized small business provider. Yeah, so great. This is really good to know. Again, just, you know, we're available to answer questions and point you to resources, but I can see from the responses here, the PTAC Center is the way to go for many of these. So anyway, so let's go to the next slide. Okay, so I am going to hand it off now to Billie Holecek, and we're going to switch gears. We're going to move over now to the buyer perspective.
Awesome.
Okay,
thank you so much, Gerald. So we just heard from Gerald about the landscape and opportunities for operations and maintenance providers in California, but system owners also need to understand why O&M of PV systems is so important. We spoke to many O&M providers to understand this and in preparation for this webinar, and one said that any day, any week that the system is not operating is additional revenue that is lost. So that is just one of the many reasons that PV O&M is important. An effective O&M plan can help to increase overall performance and reduce system downtime, like the provider we spoke to cited, but it can also increase the lifespan of the system, help to ensure the maximum financial return on investment, reduce safety risks, and keep equipment within warranty compliance, all while enhancing the overall appearance and aesthetics of the system. Instead of seeing the panels on the top of the screen with plants going through that may cause shading and some combustion issues that cause safety risks, you could instead have something a bit more visually pleasing with increased production and decreased safety risks, like what is seen on the bottom of the screen. So this all goes to show that it is imperative that an effective O&M plan is put into place. There are also a couple of indications that can help system owners understand when maintenance might be necessary for their system. And this is one example. So on the screen here, you can see an indication of what happens when an O&M plan is not put in place. If you focus on the last 2 months of May and June, where you would generally expect PV system production to be high, indicated by those red bars on the screen, you can see a large drop off in kilowatt hour production, as well as lost savings for the institution, totaling over $15,000. So having a monitoring and monitoring system in place can help organizations to catch this indication of need for service and get an O&M provider out in the field to troubleshoot the production loss. Some O&M providers also provide monitoring as a service. So in those cases, the provider would notice the loss of production and again, send someone from their team out into the field to troubleshoot the cause. Another indication of the need for service is cracked or peeling backsheets or delamination, which you can see two examples of on the screen here in those red circles. The backsheet is actually one of the most likely components of solar modules to fail and can impact the mechanical properties of the solar module and cause potential safety risks on site. So again, this is something that is important to keep an eye out for because this is a sign that your module would need to be replaced and is an important time to contact your O&M provider. The last indication of need for service that I'm going to talk about, but certainly not the last one there is broken and mismanaged wires, which you can see two examples of on this here. This is a very common issue because zip ties used to be used for wire security, and it's now understood that they often will dry up and break, causing broken wires and some potential safety risks, something that one of the providers we talked with cited. For this, an effective wire management system is one of the simplest ways to prevent dangerous electrical faults that can result in things like fires, shock hazards, financial loss, as well as pose a threat to life safety. So again, having an effective operations and maintenance plan in place can help us to avoid these potential safety issues. So that was just a couple of indications of need for service, but O&M service providers can assist organizations with a vast amount of services. On the screen here, you can see the services that the providers we spoke with cited as common services that they provide. So this includes things like monitoring of the system, which we just saw in the earlier slide, to something like an inverter replacement or washing your panels, all the way to dealing with things like animal infestations. And when we spoke with service providers, one of the things we wanted to understand was what buyers should be aware of when they are procuring O&M services. The main thing we heard from providers is that a good customer would have the as-built drawings of their system so the provider can understand the layout of the system to provide the best services available. They also suggested that buyers should understand reasonable pricing for O&M services, and there are a lot of tools out there available to assist you in this understanding, including the National Renewable Energy Lab's cost calculator, which you'll hear a bit more about on the next slide. They also suggested that it is helpful when customers understand the services that they are requesting for things like preventative maintenance, and also that the customer has a budget set aside for unexpected services that may need to occur, something like an unexpected inverter outage. It's really important to have this budget set aside so your system can run as efficiently as possible and not lose production value due to system downtime. And like all service providers, O&M providers want to ensure that their customer will be able to provide timely payments and stick to maintenance schedules. So when the provider arrives, they have access to everything needed to efficiently and effectively complete the service. And a lot of the advice we heard had to do with customers understanding the services that they are requesting. And there are so many resources out there to assist with this knowledge that's needed. One relevant resource is the Best Practices for O&M Guide developed by the National Renewable Energy Lab, or NREL. And this guide can help customers to understand what services they should request to receive all the benefits of having an O&M plan in place. Another resource also developed by NREL is the model of O&M costs for PV systems that can help customers understand what costs they can expect for the services they request. And when you're ready to procure an O&M service and start the RFP process, there are templates for both federal and non-federal sites to help develop solicitations that contain all the appropriate service areas. And if you are a federal agency, you also have access to assistance through the Federal Energy Management Program, or FEMP. And one tool is FEMP's Technical Assistance Portal, which you can use to request free technical assistance for distributed energy projects. Another tool available is FEMP's decision tree that can help agencies learn how to optimize their PV systems through answering a few simple questions. And if you still have some additional questions on how to create an O&M plan, I do really recommend viewing the first webinar in the series, in which we discuss some common challenges that buyers face when creating O&M plans, and also shared resources regarding how to overcome these challenges. In addition, you can also feel free to ask a question during our Q&A and discussion portion that will be starting in just a moment. But before that, I want to leave you all with a couple final resources to find solar PV O&M providers. One way to do this is use the Solar Energy Industries Association member list. So you can go visit their website, which Fatima just dropped in chat. So search by business type and select service provider, and then the state that you are looking for services in. One thing that I do want to note is that not every company will be on this list, and also that there are some other types of service providers commingled into this. So you still need to spend a little bit of time searching for the O&M provider, but this is a really good starting point. And for California specifically, you can use the California Solar and Storage Association list to find service providers within the state. By using a similar method, you can go to their website, select service provider, and then go search through the list to find a provider that will work for you. If you're outside of the state, your state may still offer similar lists. So I would suggest searching to see if your state has a solar and storage association to access some list of providers. And another option is to use the list provided by Amicus O&M Cooperative. Their member list includes providers from across the nation in the states in blue on the left of the screen that you may be able to use for your solar PV O&M services. This is a list of specific O&M providers. It is a bit shorter than the other lists, but if you're looking for a quick way to find one, this is definitely the list to use. And I know we just threw a lot of information at you, but we are still preparing for a third webinar in this webinar series. So we wanted to put out another poll that we'll be launching momentarily to ask buyers what additional information would be helpful for them to know. Right. And the poll should have just popped up on your screen, and we'll give it a couple seconds there. All right, looks like we're getting lots of different things that people want to learn more about, like how to write an O&M scope and how to estimate cost of services. That's definitely something that we can cover in a future webinar. I'll give it a couple more seconds as some answers are still coming in. All right, Fatima, could you share the results? Awesome. So it looks like our winners of this poll is how to estimate cost of services and how to write an O&M scope. So that's something we will definitely work to include in our final webinar in this webinar series. I'm now going to pass it back to Gerald to lead the discussion session, as well as answer any questions that the audience may have.
All right. Thank you very much, Billie. That's really interesting results on that poll too. So we have a little bit of a silly thing here. We have we kind of call it our Jeopardy board. We weren't unfortunately able to get the music to play in the background, so we can't add that bit to it. But we have posted here several questions, and we're looking for somebody to raise their hand and pick a topic. Let's see, do we have anyone raising their hand?
Hey, Gerald, we also have a couple questions in chat and Q&A. So I was just going to read those out for you and have you answer.
Yes.
So the first question is from Tim, and he is asking, what is a rule of thumb for estimating O&M costs? For example, dollars per kilowatt.
Well, so the NREL cost tool that you mentioned earlier is a great way to calculate some savings, and costs, and it's based on what services you want. But I think generally a full boat of services, cleaning, annual inspections, and all kinds of other services is considered somewhere in the, I think, $20 per kW per year, but that's that's fully loaded. So if you needed less services or wanted to do some of those things in-house, then it would be less than that. But I would use, $20 per kW per year as a general rule of thumb.
Awesome. Thank you, Gerald. We have another question from Keith, and that is, does the DOE lab or Empower have a template for RFP/RFQs to issue to prospective ESCOs or solar system developers?
Yeah, so I think the question is, do we have templated scopes that you can put into an RFP to issue for We do indeed. And that is a resource, I think, Billie, is that listed on our resource list here?
Yep, and it should be in chat as well.
Yeah, good. Yeah, so it's templated language. We're also developing something with the General Services Administration. It's not available yet. That will be a little more simplified, but the intent of that resource, by the way, is not that you take it in whole, but you find the topics or scope that you need. You just kind of cut and paste that, so you can grab stuff out of that. And then please reach out to us through the technical assistance portal too, and we can help you with any other items.
All right. And then the final question in Q&A that we have right now is, should a customer request an O&M plan when entering into a solar power purchase agreement?
Oh, absolutely. Well, so the power purchase agreement is an arrangement where you're the host. There's a system owner that's selling you the power that's generated. They are responsible, and they are self-incented to maintain that system. And they usually do. Those systems usually operate quite well, and that relationship works. There is sometimes when that company may run into a little trouble and they're not maintaining it as well. And so it would behoove you to know what reasonable maintenance cycles are for each of the components, so that you don't feel you have something on site that's, could cause a problem. So that I would, a little bit of self-education will go a long way in that, but power purchase agreements include O&M in the cost. So, yeah.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, Gerald. And then it looks like we have one question left in chat, and that's just kind of copy of the slide deck be provided, and we will send that out after the webinar along with a webinar recording. I am going to let Gerald start this discussion section, but if there is anything you want to say, I just want to note that you should raise your hand, and then we can unmute you to answer those, or to ask those questions. I'm also seeing one more question in Q&A from Rodney, and this is, how is the warranty of the equipment, panels, and inverters maintained if a different vendor is utilized instead of the installer?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So that does not affect the warranty. What does affect the warranty, however, is if you don't maintain the equipment. So here's one example. So let's say you have an inverter that has a filter and you do not follow the prescribed filter changes and other things, then you will void the warranty. So it's more important that the maintenance be done in order to keep the warranty active. So that's critical.
All right, those are all the questions we currently have. So Gerald, want to get started with the discussion topics?
Yeah, and for questions, I also want to mention that for feds that are on the call, we have the technical assistance program portal through the FEMP website, but for state institutions, which are also on the call, we have the ability, you can just reach out to us directly with a contact that we'll provide. So there's those two things to mention. So yeah, well, thanks Billie for that, by the way. And let's get back to our discussion, our Jeopardy discussion at hand. So use the hand tool there. It's at the bottom. You can see on the bottom tray, if you run your cursor down, you'll see the raise hand. And can we have somebody pick the first topic? We got a lot of shy folks. Lucas, thank you.
First generation systems.
First generation systems. Okay, let me move down to that section. I have, when is it worth it to invest in O&M services versus investing in a new system? So that's the question at hand, and we can make it a little bit of a discussion too. So if people want to add to this discussion, they just raise their hand and we'll open up the mic. And I think the service providers on the call may have some comment here, but I'll just start it off by saying that when the costs of the deferred maintenance, because if you have a system with large deferred maintenance, is significantly higher than the potential for future income from the power generation, or the safety of the system is fundamentally, the safety risks are too high, it's time to consider a new system. But let me open that up for discussion. If somebody wants to comment, so perhaps one of the service providers. I assume they've seen this scenario. Lucas, go ahead. Oh, I see he's muted. Sorry.
No, that's a very accurate assessment. If the deferred cost far exceeds the cost of a new system, the only other situation where we recommend to owners that it may be best to replace as opposed to remediate or repower is if they cannot support the ongoing activities, if they want no involvement with the system, meaning they just want it running. Older systems do require some level of owner involvement to budget out, larger repairs or even minor equipment replacements that carry a large cost. If there isn't that ongoing relationship with the owner, those are times that we will recommend doing a full demo and new system.
Under a PPA, perhaps, is that what you're
exactly, under a PPA.
Okay. Yeah, okay, that's understood. Yeah, excellent. And then we have Eric.
Yeah, hey, this is Eric Van Ice with Southland Energy. Yeah, we're involved in a situation where we have an owner that has a legacy system that was installed roughly 14 years ago, and we're in a situation where they have a fixed amount of property to dedicate to PV. And so we were able to double the amount of output from that footprint with newer technology and newer systems, and provide both for the plant to which the original system had been connected, and then also offset other loads within the municipality. So again, right. That's another situation where the system had fallen into disrepair, was outputting less than what it was intended to produce. And so again, in that case, it was determined that it was in the interest of the municipality to go ahead and upgrade the system, right. Increase its output and get more benefit.
Awesome example. Yeah, we have a lot of people on this call, I think, have older systems, is my suspicion here. But the next person, I think the raise their hand was Doug.
Yeah, this is Doug Van Worden at Rock Island Arsenal. Are the systems designed such that you can see very easily how much degradation you have, and would you replace then based upon a certain amount of degradation?
Well, I'll open that up again to the floor. We at FEMP, or there's some folks at NREL that are supporting this, actually I'm not sure where the funding is for right now for this program, but there is the potential that we can help you understand that. And it's, but yes, you can understand it's, we call it kind of weather corrected, age corrected production relative to the modeled, in a very simple way to explain that. And that gives you a sense of about where you are or how far off you are. And that's a very important function that you can get also from some good metering. So I don't know, Doug, if that answered your question or not, but.
I think especially the metering, we're looking at in a couple of years, putting in a 3 megawatt field. And that's been one of my concerns, is that we make sure we have what's needed in it to monitor it and make sure that are getting all that we plan to get for energy.
Yep, we've been thinking a lot about metering at FEMP, and there's myself and some folks at NREL that can give you our input on that. And we're actually actively investigating metering, because there's a cybersecurity component, and then there's obviously performance, and then there's some basic alarming too that's all kind of wrapped in there. So it's a big topic. So Josh, I think it was Josh.
Yeah, can you hear me? So I'm
Yeah.
with GSA for Region 10, so Washington, Oregon, Alaska, Idaho. So we have a Region 9 group also, but in Region 10, we only have 6 sites with solar panels.
Okay.
And I'm curious on I just ran the numbers on like PV watts to compare what we should get versus what we've been reporting.
Okay.
And one of the challenges we have is like we can't connect to the grid in Portland. And I'm curious who would be a good service provider to help. Like we have a Schweitzer power relay system, and I'm just not clear how that works, because we don't have high volt. The city, the utility provider can't take our solar production and do net metering, and so we lose out.
Is it accurate to say they have a constrained circuit and they can't allow any backfed?
It's like 5,000 volts or 10,000 volts going up to the 18th floor from the provider, and the transformer from the utility company is on our 18th floor.
Well,
so they're not.
If you reach out through the technical assistance portal, we can absolutely have somebody. We've got some electrical engineers and various things, but if you go through that process, we'll respond quick, and that sounds like a unique interconnection situation there, and we definitely have some interconnection folks that can.
Yeah, because we have like an electrical engineer on staff, but he doesn't, work out with this on a daily basis. So just trying to get a better understanding of how we can move forward. And then the other question I have is, for equipment that's like 10 years old, because most of our stuff was installed in like 2008, 2012 timeframe.
Right. Yeah.
Where is that turning point? Because we're putting a lot of emphasis on maintenance being done on our PVs, but like the cost of maintenance and metering, it was like $10,000 to repair our meter in Richland, Washington, and the whole system only produces 10,000 kilowatts a year. So it's like it takes just 10 years to pay back for putting the new meter on.
Mm-hmm.
Like it seems like it's fine if we call it like a pilot, but it's not really like a revenue generation.
Well,
at that point.
$10,000 for a meter is a lot of money. I'm not sure why that is.
Yeah, I agree.
Again, I think that's something we could probably help offline with. But yeah, you're right. For the reasons that were already mentioned earlier, that if you're not able to produce enough to justify the operational component, and or it poses a safety concern, and or you need the space better utilized by modern systems, then it's maybe time to think about it. But we can again, Josh, reach out to us. This is the kind of stuff we love to try to help problem solve.
And what is the contact info for the portal you described?
Let's see, Fatima, Billie, do you mind throwing the link there for Josh? And then also I want to open up if there's anyone that wants to provide a follow-on comment to Josh.
I'd add one comment to Josh's.
Okay.
It is common that major equipment carries long warranties. Solar panels, you'll have 7 to 10 year workmanship, 25-year performance. Inverters typically 10-year, extend to 15, 20 if you want, and you can pay for that. But metering, weather stations, other components on the system for the balance of the system typically don't carry long manufacturer warranties. Weather stations, kip and zone, even Schweitzer relays, etc., won't carry those warranties. So when you are reviewing O&M contracts, be conscious of what's included, if it's a full wrap, or if those are items you'll have to, as the owner, budget for, or just keep a budget for replacing those items. You mentioned the Schweitzer meter. I love Schweitzer equipment. You know, there's a few manufacturers that do the relays. They tend to be expensive, and your typical O&M provider is not going to be a relay specialist. We have 1 to 2 guys on our team that deals with relays. So just be conscious that you will need to budget something in for that balance of system items. Similar to if you had I heard the mention of performance and degradation. We commonly see soil sensors now to make sure that soiling isn't being misconstrued as degradation. So just be conscious that those
Great.
balance of system components won't always carry that long-term warranty and may carry costs for the owner.
Great point. Thank you. Yeah, excellent industry input right there. So perfect. Yeah, so let's open it up for another topic. Josh,
There's a question in chat from Jesse
okay.
asking, what can you tell us about the 5747 requirement? I don't know if Jesse wants to unmute themselves and explain a little bit more about the requirement, or if you want to respond to that, Gerald.
5747 requirement, is that? I don't know if I understand what that is. That I'm just gonna. Oh, that is an IRS requirement having to do with. I just looked it up quickly. Having to do with in the investment tax credit, I think. Yeah, do you mind? Is it Jesse that raised that question? Jesse, do you mind? A little dialogue on that, just for clarity. Again, I don't know, Fatima, do you unmute, or does he unmute himself or herself?
So I can give people the ability to speak since it's a webinar, but if Jesse wants to unmute himself or put it in the chat to clarify, that'd be helpful.
So I don't know what agency you're with, Jesse, but I will say that there are people in the know in our groups. I know some about the investment tax credit and the rules, but there's others that know a lot more. So if you would reach out to us, I can make sure you get your answer addressed. So you may have exceeded my knowledge around the investment tax credit. So, okay, well, good. Well, thank you. Any other questions posted in chat? Okay, I don't see any more. Okay. Well, let's see. We've got another 5 minutes. We'll take a few more minutes before our wrap up. And let's just pick another topic. So if somebody wants to unmute themselves, raise their hand, unmute themselves. I think we're having a good discussion here, so let's keep it going.
This is Doug, Rock Island Arsenal.
Yeah.
Do we need a weather station no matter what? If we have a fixed set field panel, do we still need a weather station?
Well, I'll just comment, but I think this is a good one for industry. I've seen a lot of legacy systems with very fancy weather stations that are defunct, and they're very difficult to keep connected. However, there are some very useful data points from that. And I don't know, does the industry folks want to jump in on that?
I'd add a note to that.
Okay.
I've installed, when I started solar, say, 15 plus years ago on large systems, we'd put in $50,000 to $80,000 weather stations.
Right.
Definitely not worth it. Again, those don't come with long warranties. So to your question, smaller sites, which I'd say is, under 500 kilowatts. No, you can use just weather adjusted data from NREL or, outside weather stations. larger plants, once you get above 500 kilowatts, and so you have a good O&M provider, you have a good cleaning schedule, then knowing the weather data will allow you to kind of improve the performance. But I'd say smaller sites, from what we've seen with the kind of cost versus, cost benefit, no, not always required. And most monitoring companies now allow you to just utilize virtual weather stations.
That's what I thought. Yeah, Lucas, I was going to ask you that a colleague at NREL was able to get a hold of some satellite generated weather information, including the solar resource, right?
Yeah, and it's very accurate. Yeah, so it's improved greatly. It didn't used to be that way, but now that a lot of the systems we rely on use weather data, then that's getting incorporated right into solar as well.
That's what I saw. So I would assume the metering companies are subscribing to that same data set, and they can provide that through their service, right?
They can. The times that we do typically always use weather stations, and more advanced ones are when you have non-fixed systems, single or dual axis trackers. And then we'll have multiple radiant sensors. And if we have east and west configurations or bifacials, and we're really trying to validate what that performance guarantee is, or those are times.
Sounds like more utility scale.
Utility stuff, yeah, not
distributed gen stuff. Well, I have to apologize. We are down to the wire. I think this is a discussion. It was really excellent. I think we could go and go and go. There's a lot of good exchange here, which I was hoping for. So thank you. But I'm going to hand it back to Fatima so she can wrap us up.
All right, thanks, Gerald, and thanks everyone who participated in the discussion. Just to close out the webinar, we wanted to leave you with some more resources, and this is a big list, so I'm not going to drop all the links, so definitely check out our slides and our recording of the webinar, which we will distribute to everyone who registered and attended this webinar. So these are essentially just links to trainings, to contract template language, informational guides, fact sheets, and a ton of other resources that our team and others have developed around solar PV O&M. So definitely, again, check out these resources when we send out the slides. Oops, I actually clicked on one of the resources. And just to note that this is our website, so.lbl.gov/renewables acquisition. Go ahead and check out our website as well, where we have some of these resources listed out all in one place, as well as some more information about what our program is doing. And we just wanted to give a big thank you to all of the providers and buyers that we spoke with in preparation for this webinar. If we didn't get your company logo on here, go ahead and send us an email and we'll add it in before we distribute the slides. But again, thank you all. Your insights helped us put together this webinar. And just wrapping up the webinar, this is our contact information. My name's Fatima. You heard from Gerald and Billie throughout the webinar. You can go ahead and reach out to us with any questions about the webinar content, or if you were interested in some of the resources that we sent out in today's webinar, just let us know. And with that, I think we will wrap up the recording portion and